Good afternoon and welcome back. You didn't think I forgot you guys. I said we were going to talk about this wonderful game today, and we did. Obviously, real life got in the way of my plans, but such is the way of things. So we're going to talk about Villains and Vigilantes, which is pretty much taken up 75 to 80% of my gaming life. There are huge chunks of my gaming history when this was the only game I was playing. 90% of college, bam. All my teenage years, bam. Several years after getting back from college, bam, up until today. I mean, if somebody said, "Hey, let's play V&V," I'd be the first in line. While Marvel is the best for my brain, this is the best superhero role-playing system, bar none. This isn't the version that I grew up on. I grew up on the version before this, but this is probably the better version of second edition because they went back and fixed a lot of the mistakes. The art's a little better, the layout's a little better. A lot of the issues that second edition, first edition were addressed and fixed. So then this is before Jeff decided that it needed to be a point-based system. So yeah, this is probably my preferred version. It's pretty much the same. Now you've heard me talk about Villains and Vigilantes dozens of times, how much I love it, how much it works. It's one of the few systems that where you can play heightened strength flying alien and down and dirty street dude, you know who I mean. And they work out, one doesn't overshine another. Somehow the system makes it so the guy with 2 powers and the guy with 12 powers kind of roll out the same because of the way the combat system works, the way levels work. It's a very intuitive system. So I'm not going to talk about what's great about this system because, again, this isn't a review. This is, like I said it before, this is us walking into a game store. We see this game on the shelves and we're like, hey, and we open it and we look for it and what catches our eye. So normally I talk about everything I love about this game, but I've said that several times. So what is it that most people don't like about this game? And there's probably 3 things that most people don't like about this game. And pretty much could use some more art. But okay, rule number 1: your character has to be yourself. I think most people didn't like that idea. I don't want to play myself. I don't play myself with superpowers. More appropriately, when most of us were getting into this game, we were like 12. And really, would you trust a 12-year-old with the superpowers in real life? I mean, sure, Billy Batson, but he's got the wisdom of Solomon. Most of your 12-year-olds don't. If you gave me superpowers actually when I was 12, I would have been a villain, and there would have been a lot of dead bullies probably. So yeah, most people didn't really get off on playing themselves or playing with themselves, but that's a different topic. But yeah, the first rule was your first character always had to be you and then you randomly generate superpowers. Some advantages to that, some disadvantages. I found most closely didn't really like the idea. But we all played ourselves when I first played, and every game I was in, my first character was always me with superpowers, whether it was 12-year-old me, 18-year-old me, 22-year-old me, 30-year-old me. Yeah. The second probably is the random powers. You could have anywhere from 1 to 6 powers or 2 to 7 powers if you took a weakness. Now, it's pretty random, and you can have randomly generated powers too. So sometimes you get characters that make sense and sometimes you don't. Sometimes you're stuck with 1 superpower and sometimes you're like, I got 6. 7 if I take a weakness. So that's probably the second gripe most people have about the system is not only is it randomly generated powers, but the powers themselves are pretty random. You could roll heightened strength and have a heightened strength of +3 or +4. Because you also added the numbers randomly, and it was heightened strength was 3d10. So you had an average of +3 to +30 to your strength. The average of 3d10 is around a 4, a 2, and an 8. So and I do know somebody who got a 3, a 1, and a 1. So their heightened strength was +5. At which point we were just like, yeah, you could probably reroll. The weaknesses could also be pretty devastating to your character, but most of the major complaints were randomly generated powers, and because you wore randomly generated powers, sometimes the power combinations didn't work. I never found a character concept that I randomly generated that I wasn't able to work with. Some of them were more ridiculous than others. I mean, I did base a character off of the Yu-Gi-Oh card House of Adhesive Tape. So, yeah. And again, the power level. But to circumvent that, your powers slowly got better as you leveled. So your flight at level 1 and your flight at level 3 will be drastically different. The third is the attack versus defense and the initiative. Let me see if I can find it. So the initiative system is a huge gripe because it favors characters with very high agility or heightened speed. And a character with a heightened speed or a heightened agility, which realistically would go off more times in combat than normal dude. But when you're actually playing it out, and when it's like one player's got 9 actions and the other player's got 2, then yeah, it does seem like the system really does favor high dexterity characters, to the point where sooner or later, everybody in every game I was in had at least one character with, oh, I rolled height and agility. What a shock. And then that leads to the combat chart. Now, on the surface, the combat chart is cool because it lists all the powers and all the defenses, and then the number you would need to be successful with that power. So let's say Bionics, and I'm using emotion control. Well, Bionics doesn't give you any normal separate powers against emotion control, so there's no modifiers for me trying to emotion control somebody with Bionics. But as lightning control, that would actually probably be pretty easier to hit me because I've got the metal and the power. But some other powers might be not so hard to hit me because my Bionics. So it does work, but there are some complaints about it. As he said, there are some gripes about it. But again, you also have to remember that your level also counts in. It just wasn't really explained very well, which is another thing I like about this one, is that it does explain a lot of stuff. But there are systems about it, like let's see if it's still there. Yeah, so like android body versus mental powers, like mind control. This came up in a game where one of my friend's characters got mind control, but she argued that since her character was an android, she didn't have a brain to control, so she should at least have gotten a better defense against mind control because she doesn't have a human brain. She was a machine. She was an android. I do see that they've decreased the chances of it being effective on the combat chart now, so that's good. V&V was always lower the better. A 1 was the best you could get, and a 20 was the worst you can get. And that's counterintuitive, especially in superheroes. You really want, whatever you roll, that 20 should mean something. 1 is counterintuitive because we're sort of pre-programmed to think 1 is the worst and 20 is the best on a 20 arc. Remember, this is during the THACO years too, but yeah. So a lot of people had trouble with that. Like, I'm +4 to armor class, but I'm rolling lower than the better. Shouldn't that be -4? I don't understand. But somehow it always worked. V&V always worked. It was probably just the best thing about it. It always worked. You could have my first V&V character had 3 powers. 1 was heightened strength and 2 was mutant power. So it was like, well, pretty obvious. I'm gonna go with mutant powers that help out my heightened strength. And then my weakness was reduced agility, which is the worst thing to have. But I was able to finagle the DM into letting me have diminished senses as my weakness instead, because of the glasses and the dyslexia at the time. So, but it still ended up with me getting horrible minuses if I didn't have my glasses on. But that's pretty random, right? I rolled 1 power. I got +1 because, and then I took the weakness. So I had 2 powers. First power is heightened strength. The other remaining powers was mutant power. And then the kid next to me, when he rolled his character, got 6. And he rolled randomly, and he had ended up with like a pet dragon and all this other stuff. And I was like, I'm really strong, but I go once per round. And God forbid I drop my glasses because then I'm like Velma. So for some, that definitely was a gripe. And yet somehow once you got over that, again, it always worked. Now, are there flaws in the system besides the combat chart and the favoring of high dex characters and the randomness, and then some characters can just be unbelievably broken? Yeah, there are, but they're all minor, and most of them have been fixed by the time you get to this issue of the game, before you get to Jeff's wanting it to be a point-based champions ripoff and it getting all weird. This is probably the best version, the Monkey House Games version of V&V, because it's not owned by the other company. It has a whole separate kettle of super fish, and the whole thing with Fantasy Games Unlimited and V&V and the rights and who blah blah blah. And it's not Jeff's weird point-based system. Shout out to Jeff. So yeah, this is probably the best version if you could find it. So again, I'm not reviewing it. I'm just sort of saying what stands out and what is it about this game, because the word of mouth about this game is always great. Anytime you have a conversation about superheroes, top 5 superheroes, this is usually in the list. It could definitely use some more art. This is also the first superhero, one of the only games I ever saw that addressed things like rewards in superheroes. What's the number one complaint you hear people why they don't want to play superheroes? Because I don't get to take their stuff. In D&D, if I kill somebody, I get to take their stuff. In superheroes, I don't get to kill anybody, and I don't get to take their stuff. Well, Jeff went into the fact that actually, there is a reward for these guys. There are rewards for turning in criminals, and you can take their stuff. Where does Batman get the giant penny and the dinosaur and the giant playing card? Right? That's stuff that Batman took and never gave back. I'm sure the museum is still like, hey, when are we going to get that giant penny back? Hey, DM Blackwell. So yeah, it's one of the first games I ever saw that addressed that. It's also, I think, one of the first, if not one of the only games that listed legal stuff. Like assault, arson, kidnapping, criminal mischief, my personal favorite. Flame powers. Am my flame powers starting a fire? Am I guilty of arson? And how superpowers would be, viewed by the law. See more art like this. So we've got a lot of pages going into the legal stuff, maybe too many pages going into the legal stuff, but on the other hand, it's cool. And he talks about acting the part. He talks about merchandising. Again, I can't make any money playing your game. I want to go and kill monsters and take their stuff. No, dude, you merchandise your character and make tons of money. Aaron the Relentless, the 1980s cartoon. The Adventures of Aaron Relentless, the action figure. Aaron the Relentless, the breakfast cereal. Dude, come on. The 80s was all about merchandising characters. He-Man, GoBots, all those cartoons was merchandising toys. So yes, you can make money as a superhero and not have to worry about things. That rules for gadgets and gizmos. That's another one that people had some issues with because it felt like I couldn't have enough gizmos and gadgets. And let's face it, gadgets are very prevalent with a lot of super characters. From the obvious ones, Batman, Green Arrow, till not so obvious characters. But lots of characters have gadgets. And the inventing rules in V&V were a little screwy. It always felt like you couldn't invent enough things for your character. They're not as screwy as the inventing rules in other games, but yeah, I think they fixed them a little, but still, I think the point was you didn't want characters to have their powers, but then also be able to invent more powers, as opposed to thinking the way of, well, I invent a new power specifically for this situation, but then, I'm never going to use it again. Where am I ever going to use the anti-glow bomb other than when I'm fighting the invading glowing aliens from, Mercury? So that's been fixed, you know, and addresses more like gizmos, like, you know, the cable gun and the things you just assume every super character has. And you don't have to really worry about them inventing it. But really, the inventing rules are all about that. I need this specific thing for this specific scenario. But once that specific scenario is over, when am I ever going to use this again? So I think they fixed that. But again, that's another one people had gripes with. Not enough art, examples of how to run the game, example characters, game balance. They went into describing the worlds in this version. So when they mentioned characters in the last version, they didn't really tell you who the characters were. But in this version, they do kind of talk about some of the characters. They could have done more. But again, yeah. Would I recommend this game? Absolutely. If you can find this version, it's probably the best of the versions. It has all the random awesomeness. Uh, could use some more art. There's still stuff that can be explained better. It's still counterintuitive with the lower the better. But like Aaron said, this back panel sort of makes up for everything, right? Yeah. Remember the Villains and Vigilantes comic book? Which was they did Crisis of Crusader Citadel, Shatterman, and Condor. Yeah, I mean, like, yeah, and then of course we cycle back to well, your first character is yourself. Does anybody really want to play themselves with superpowers? And if you got superpowers, would you really be a superhero? Let's face it, most of us would either be anti-heroes or villains. Sure, I've got superpowers and I could save you, but it's all the way over there. And I'm 59. Still, it works and it's an easy system. Yes, you should use my link down below to get your copy of V&V for $7.50 on DriveThruRPG. Yes, tell them the OGGM sent you, and I get a little percentage if you buy it using my link. Thank you, Aaron. Link down below. It's hard for me to say anything bad about this system, and all the bad things are superfluous and easily work through. You could even switch it to higher the better. I think 90% of every game I was ever in eventually did just switch the combat system around, so higher the better mattered. The math doesn't work, but it's like it does work. I don't know. I never had a problem making a character for this game. I never had a problem with any of my ideas not working. I've played in multiple V&V games all throughout the 80s. Went to college. Pretty much 90% of every role-playing game I played in college was V&V or V&V games that have been converted to GURPS Supers. I've run V&V games for years. I've played in multiple different versions of V&V using all the systems. It's just a great, like, if, it is on my desert island list. Like, if I could only take 2 games with me on a desert island, and I'd have to pick the 2 games that I could use to run every possible scenario, one of those 2 is always going to be Villains and Vigilantes. Because I can run any level-based D20 system, be it fantasy, be it science fiction, with V&V. It's that intuitive. And it's the only game, or one of the few games, that has the things like the rules on inventing, the rules on laws, and it's the way the combat chart works. You never feel like your character's completely useless. You might feel like your character doesn't get as many actions as the other character, but when your character does get to do their thing, they do their thing extremely well. And then the other guy's like, well, I'm useless in this mental mind control shit. I can lift a building, but you're all about the mental mind control. Yeah, it just works. So again, this isn't a review. This is just first opinions. If I walked into a game store and saw this on the shelf, I'd pick it up and say, when are we going to play? Which is what I did when I was, 12 and first saw it on a game shelf and we were playing. And I had to randomly generate myself with superpowers. Well, I got heightened strength. The last power you'd expect 12-year-old me to have. So there you go. Villains and Vigilantes, second edition and this edition, probably the 2 best. It's always in every top 5 list. It is my GOAT list, my Mount Everest of superhero role-playing games. It's Marvel, Villains and Vigilantes, and the other two. My game, of course. Buy my game, link down below. So anyways, there we go. If you have any questions before we sign off, I don't want to keep you guys for a half an hour just continuing to spiral on how much I love this game and how, it works. It works. It works, Anyways, thanks for hanging out with me this afternoon. I'll be back tomorrow with your regularly scheduled nonsense. Until then, please take a moment to like, share, subscribe to DM Blackwell, the creator of Horde Wars, an amazing game, an amazing dude. Aaron doesn't do anything on his channel, but you could subscribe to Aaron's channel. If you feel a little generous with the holidays coming up, please consider supporting the OGGM. You can use my link in the description down below to get your own copy of Villains and Vigilantes or my superhero role-playing game, Vigilantes for Shadow Dark, which I'm currently rewriting and just sent to Kelsey for the first playtest round. So we'll see what she has to say about that. And until next time, truth, justice, and the Villains and Vigilantes away. Neon signs, they guide my journey. Broken streets and tired bars. Every stranger tells a story. Every corner